These are the archaeological remains that reveal humanity's darkest rituals, and they are the foundation of everything we find terrifying today. From ancient bogs to high mountain peaks, evidence of human sacrifice spans every continent and civilization, creating the blueprint for our modern understanding of horror. When we watch films like The Wicker Man or Midsommar, when we read about ancient gods demanding blood offerings, we are witnessing echoes of practices that were once brutally real. The terror we feel is not just fiction, it is genetic memory, passed down from ancestors who lived in societies where ritual killing was as normal as prayer. The story begins in our earliest civilizations. Archaeological evidence from Başur Höyük in Turkey dates human sacrifice back to 3000 BCE, though the practice likely extends far beyond recorded history. At the ancient city of in Mesopotamia, around 2600 BCE, royal death pits reveal the staggering scale of these rituals. When kings and queens died, entire retinues followed them into the afterlife, not voluntarily, but as offerings to ensure their ruler's power continued beyond death. King Djer of Egypt had 318 people sacrificed and buried in his tomb, with another 269 killed and placed in surrounding enclosures. These were not random killings. They were carefully orchestrated ceremonies involving servants, guards, musicians, and courtiers who had the so-called honor of serving their master for eternity. The privilege, of course, was not their choice. But it's in Northern Europe where we find our most haunting evidence. The Bog Bodies of Denmark, Ireland, and Germany tell stories that seem ripped from horror films, yet they are documented history. When archaeologists discovered Tollund Man in 1950, he was so perfectly preserved that authorities initially treated his discovery as a modern murder case. Only radiocarbon dating revealed he had died 2,400 years earlier. The circumstances of his death reveal the ritualistic nature of his killing. His last meal consisted of porridge made from barley, flax, and pale persicaria seeds, significant because pale persicaria was normally removed as a weed during grain processing. This deliberate inclusion suggests the meal itself was part of the ritual. Then came the triple death. He was strangled, struck on the head, and had his throat cut, following a pattern archaeologist P.V. Glob identified across multiple bog body discoveries. Old Croghan Man, found in Ireland, suffered an even more elaborate ritual killing. Standing 6 feet 6 inches tall, he would have towered over ancient Celtic society. Yet his killers took their time. They cut holes through his upper arms and threaded ropes through them to restrain him. They repeatedly stabbed him. Most significantly, they sliced off his nipples, an act that, according to Ned Kelly of the National Museum of Ireland, would have rendered him incapable of kingship in this world or the next, since sucking a king's nipples was a gesture of submission in ancient Ireland. These were not random acts of violence. They were performances, each step carefully choreographed according to beliefs we can barely comprehend. The bog itself was sacred, a liminal space between earth and water, life and death, where offerings could reach the gods. Across the Atlantic, the scale of human sacrifice reached industrial proportions. In 2019, archaeologists working on Peru's northern coast uncovered evidence of what may be the largest single incident of mass child sacrifice in world history. At Huanchaquito Las Llamas, the Chimu civilization ritually killed more than 140 children and 200 young llamas around 550 years ago. The discovery stunned researchers. John Verano, the biological anthropologist who led the excavation, had worked in Peru for 35 years without encountering anything comparable. Muddy footprints preserved in the earth showed that these children had marched 1 mile from the adobe city of Chan Chan to their deaths. Their hearts had been surgically removed while they were still alive. But perhaps no civilization has captured our imagination and our sense of horror quite like the Aztecs. The archaeological evidence from Tenochtitlán paints a picture of ritual killing on a scale that defies comprehension. At the Templo Mayor, archaeologists have uncovered over 600 human skulls arranged in the Huaytzompantli, a massive rack display designed to showcase the empire's power through death. The most famous single event occurred in 1487 during the dedication of the main pyramid. Spanish accounts describe 4 days of continuous sacrifice, with estimates ranging from 10,000 to 80,400 victims. Modern scholars debate these numbers fiercely. Some argue the Spanish deliberately exaggerated to justify their conquest, while others point to demographic studies suggesting 20,000 to 250,000 people died annually across the entire Aztec Empire. The truth lies somewhere between colonial propaganda and modern revisionism. What is undeniable is that human sacrifice was woven into the fabric of Aztec society in ways that went far beyond simple religious observance. It was theater, politics, and theology combined into spectacles of state power. High in the Andes Mountains, the Inca practiced capacocha, child sacrifice on sacred peaks. The 3 mummies discovered at Llullaillaco volcano in 1999 represent some of the best preserved human remains ever found. These children, including a teenage girl known as La Doncella, were drugged with alcohol and coca before being left to die of exposure at 22,000 feet above sea level. Recent analysis of La Doncella's hair revealed the highest concentration of coca ever found in Andean human remains, suggesting she spent months being prepared for her death. This was not sudden violence. It was a slow, methodical process of transforming children into sacred offerings. A 2026 study identified evidence of deliberate mummification in some capacocha victims, indicating that the Inca had perfected techniques for preserving their sacrificial subjects. The psychological mechanisms behind these practices become clearer through modern research. A 2016 study published in Nature found that human sacrifice became more common as societies grew more stratified. In egalitarian groups, only 25% practiced ritual killing. But in highly hierarchical civilizations, that number jumped to 67%. This wasn't coincidental. Human sacrifice served as the ultimate demonstration of power, the ability to take life arbitrarily, to demand the ultimate submission. As researcher Joseph Watts noted, our results suggest that ritual killing helped humans transition from the small egalitarian groups of our ancestors to the large stratified societies we live in today. The connection between these ancient practices and modern horror becomes clear when we trace the evolution of the genre. Folk horror, which emerged in British cinema with films like The Wicker Man in 1973, draws directly from historical accounts of ritual sacrifice. The isolated rural communities, the ancient traditions, the slow build toward inevitable violence. These elements reflect actual documented practices. When we watch modern films like Midsommar, we are not just seeing fictional terror. We are witnessing interpretations of real human behavior, sanitized and dramatized, but rooted in archaeological fact. The communal nature of the killings, the elaborate rituals, the way victims are prepared and processed, all of this echoes practices that occurred across dozens of civilizations. Horror, as a genre, exists because humans have always been capable of systematic, ritualized cruelty. The Bog Bodies with their triple deaths, the Aztec skull racks, the carefully drugged children left to freeze on mountain peaks, these were not aberrations. They were normal, accepted parts of sophisticated civilizations. Today, as folk horror experiences a renaissance, we are drawn to these stories not despite their historical basis, but because of it. We recognize something familiar in the communal violence, the religious justifications, and the way ordinary people become complicit in extraordinary cruelty. The archaeological record shows us that our capacity for horror is not learned. It is inherited. Every ritual blade, every preserved bog body, every skull rack tells the same story. Humans have always known how to transform death into spectacle, suffering into meaning, terror into control. We call it entertainment now. Our ancestors called it civilization.